I play a lot of indie games on handhelds. All kinds of styles, all kinds of genres, and most of them work great portable. But one style I've noticed works especially well on handheld and always seems to catch my attention is this low poly, stylized look. And it's not because handhelds can't run bigger, more demanding games, but because this kind of visual style just fits the format really naturally. So in this video, I want to talk about that a bit, why low poly indie games feel so good to play on handhelds, and highlight some of my favorites along the way. Links for all the games shown today will be in the description, so if you see something you like, you know what to do. This realization actually didn't hit me all at once. Spending so much time digging through the Steam store, looking for those different indie gems, trying them out on different handhelds, I started noticing that a lot of the games I enjoy most, especially as of lately, share the same kind of look. Simple geometry, chunky textures, stylized lighting, games that don't try too hard to look realistic, and instead focus on having a really strong visual identity. And even when these games weren't designed for handhelds, they still end up feeling like that's one of the best ways to play them. But before I get too ahead of myself, what actually is low poly? What does that even mean? Well, when people say low poly, they're usually talking about games that use simpler 3D models, fewer polygons, lower resolution textures, and more basic lighting. Not worse looking, just less complex and usually more stylized. And that's what's really interesting, is this look didn't start as a style choice. Back in the 5th generation of consoles, PS1, N64, Sega Saturn, games looked like that mostly because they had to. Hardware was limited, memory was limited, so devs built worlds out of simple geometry, low-res textures, and strong shapes just to make everything run. On the other hand, because of those limits, a lot of games from that era ended up with really distinct visual styles. You could recognize a lot of the most popular games instantly. Fast forward to nowadays, and that same kind of look has come back in a big way in the indie scene. Not because devs are forced to make games that way anymore, but because it gives them more freedom. Lower complexity means smaller teams can build fuller worlds more easily, and the style leaves more room for atmosphere, personality, and experimentation, where the gameplay usually ends up being the strongest part. And after playing so many of these games lately, it makes sense why this look has come back the way it has. The same design choices that made those games work back then are a big part of why this style still feels so good now. And hey, if you've been enjoying this video so far, feel free to hit like and consider subscribing. We're building a small community here, talking about indie games, handhelds, and all kinds of different gaming topics like this. And it's been really cool seeing more people find the channel lately. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, you're definitely in the right place. So I think a big part of why these games feel so good on handheld comes down to how clearly they read on a smaller screen. With most low poly stylized visuals, everything stays really readable, even if the resolution is lower. Strong shapes, simple textures, and bold colors, it all helps. When you shrink that down to a handheld size display, nothing feels lost, nothing feels too small. And it feels like it works just as well on a TV or a monitor as it does on a handheld. On the other side of that, a lot of modern games look best on a big screen. When you put that same level of detail onto something small, things can start to feel cramped, harder to see, and a little less immersive. Not bad, just not always ideal for a portable screen. And this is something I don't think gets talked about enough with handheld gaming. Readability makes a huge difference in how much you actually enjoy playing those games. Because with PC handhelds especially, most of these games weren't designed for small screens. They were made for monitors or TVs. And maybe that's why people keep wanting bigger and bigger handhelds, even if that means that they're not portable anymore. With these low poly indie games though, I almost never get that feeling. Even when the world is big or the game is doing something really ambitious, the visuals usually stay pretty clean. The gameplay stays readable, and the whole thing just scales really well no matter what kind of screen you're on. Another part of this isn't just how these games look, it's how they feel to play on handheld. A lot of indie games just fit the way handheld gaming usually happens. Most of the time, when I'm on my Thor or the deck, I'm not sitting down for a long session. It's shorter, pick up and play kind of stuff. On the couch, in bed, in the car when my girlfriend's driving, or whenever I've just got a little bit of time to kill. And games with this kind of style work really well for that. They're easy to jump into, don't need much tweaking, and you can just start playing without thinking too much about settings. Not because they're small, but because they feel more contained, they're more direct and easy to digest. So whether you play for 10 minutes or a couple hours, it still feels like a full experience without worrying about performance, battery, or anything like that. And that kind of simplicity just fits handheld gaming really well. Okay, so I think this is where the whole low poly on handheld thing really starts to make sense to me. Back when this style first showed up, it wasn't really a choice. Games looked this way because the hardware couldn't do much else to push the graphics. And now it's funny because even though handhelds are really powerful now, you can still run into different limitations. Tweaking settings, watching your FPS, battery draining, fans spinning up, text being too small, or just feeling like the game is dying for a bigger screen. And it's not that AAA games don't work on handhelds, they definitely do. But the more I play handheld, the more I notice some games just work with the hardware instead of fighting against it. And low poly indie games are a perfect example of that. They run really well. They look great on smaller screens and they don't fight the device the way heavier games sometimes do. Which is kind of funny because a style that came from hardware limits years ago ends up fitting handheld gaming perfectly now, just for different reasons. And that's a big part of why I keep coming back to these games when I play portable. Not because they're the only thing that works, far from it, and not because of nostalgia, but because they fit the way I like to play. And honestly, that's one of the things I love most about handheld gaming, being able to experience these kind of games my own way, and to be able to take them with me wherever I go. Hey, thanks again for watching. This channel's actually been growing so much in the past couple weeks, especially after the Thor video that I posted. And it's just been really cool seeing a small community start to form around this kind of content, talking about indie games and handhelds and just sharing ideas like this. It's honestly been a blast. I want to say I appreciate everyone who's been watching and commenting and coming back for the next video. If you enjoy this kind of stuff yourself, you're definitely welcome here. My name has been Tom, and I hope to see you in the next one.